The reason I killed him was because he was a child molester.
But you did in fact kill him.
Oh, sure.
And you intended to.
Oh, sure, yes. It was my bunkie, and I had found out that he was in prison for child molestation. Really bad case. So that night he was trying to justify why he did it, and I just told him to be quiet, and he would have to leave in the morning to find a new cell. But he continued to talk about it and try to justify it. So he was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
This is Shane Goldsby, 26 years old. Goldsby is in prison for stealing a police car and engaging the police on a wild chase before crashing the vehicle and injuring an officer. This 2017 incident landed him in prison to be cellmates with a 70-year-old man named Robert Munger. At the Airway Heights Correctional Facility, Munger was incarcerated for 43 years after being found guilty of numerous counts of child molestation and child pornography. Goldsby was ordered to share a cell with Munger, and this is where things got interesting.
I changed my fucking life in 2019, you know, I gave my life to God, dude. You guys want to put me in this fucking position, dude? To be face to face with this.
One night things went downhill when Shane overheard Munger boasting about his misdeeds. Not only did this disturb Shane, but slowly but surely, he was able to piece together exactly who he was sharing a cell with. You see, years ago, Shane's younger sister was a victim to SA at the mercy of an older man. Shane was able to piece together that the crimes Robert Munger was referencing and taunting Shane about were performed on his very own little sister years ago. Can you imagine being locked in a cell with someone who caused so much hurt and trauma to one of your loved ones? So, what did Shane do? Well, according to stories, Goldsby snapped after listening to Munger boast about what he did to Shane's younger sister. Goldsby tried to contain his rage, but he could only do too little in the face of constant taunting from Munger. One day, he had enough. He struck Munger from behind, knocking him to the ground, then hit and kicked him 14 times in the face and stamped on his head 4 more times. Munger died 3 days later as a result of his injuries. Goldsby told reporters he was shocked to learn who Munger was and had asked for a different cellmate but was denied. This stuff doesn't happen. You're talking about the same institution, unit, and cell as this person. That's like getting the jackpot in the casino 7 times, he said, dismissing the possibility.
The same pod in the same cell as this dude, okay? That's like hitting the jackpot in a casino 7 times.
During his trial, Goldsby showed remorse for his actions. He apologized to Munger's family and admitted that he wasn't in the best frame of mind the day he met Munger.
I'm ashamed of my actions. That led to this man's death, you know? I was put into his man can't die.
Goldsby was too emotional during his sentencing to read his apology, but his attorney did so on his behalf. She added that Goldsby had a difficult childhood, having been placed in 10 different foster homes before reuniting with his mother, who began using drugs with him. The Washington Department of Corrections stated that such jail assignments are prohibited. Still, they could not uncover a connection between Goldsby and Munger owing to difficulties such as different last names. Despite support from some quarters, Goldsby was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison, making his total term 33 years. He was also ordered to pay reparations to Munger's family and serve 3 years of parole upon completion of his sentence. While some people argued that taking another person's life is never acceptable, others argued that what Shane did was what any reasonable big brother would have done for their family. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the violent and unsolicited acts that Anthony George did whilst serving his sentence in 2013.
What happens if someone disrespects you?
I don't know, usually they get handled. I don't know.
This is Anthony George. George claimed he was wasted on the night he ended the life of Adam Kargus. The tragic story of Adam Kargus will break your heart. 29 years old, Adam was serving a small 90-day sentence for fraud at the time of his death and shared cell number 3 on Unit 6 left at the Elgin Middlesex Detention Center with Anthony George, who was serving time for aggravated assault. Adam was brutally attacked and beaten until he lost his life at the hands of Anthony George, a fellow inmate at the EMDC in London, Ontario, on the night of October 31st, 2013. The most disturbing aspect? This incident occurred in full view of video surveillance cameras, with other inmates yelling for help. Still, no correctional officers or guards were present to watch the footage.
I wasn't able to access the video when I was giving my disclosure at all.
But before then, this should make you worry. Adam had been choked, punched, kicked, and stomped on for 22 minutes when he appeared in his cell window, hands raised as if praying for help. But his desperate plea went unanswered, and he was tortured for another 37 minutes before being killed. You're probably asking yourself, well, where were the jail officers and security team at the time of the incident? Well, officers who heard these noises coming from the cell did not think to check on what was happening. The details of the assault and missed opportunities to prevent or stop it are truly horrifying. Anthony George, the inmate who killed Adam, had a long history of violent crime inside and outside of prison.
A lot of people I've spoken to who know you, the word is they don't want to mess with you.
I'm actually a nice guy, and too. Like, I don't do something like usually until I have to do it, right? I like if nothing has to be done, I'll just sit around and do it. But I'll be the first guy to step up when something has to be done. Right?
Like, what do you mean by that?
Like if something has to be handled for the crew or something, I'll be the first guy to step up. So put my freedom on the line, my safety on the line to handle it for the crew.
What happens if someone disrespects you?
I don't know. Usually they get handled. I don't know.
He had been in segregation for aggravated assault before being transferred to Elgin, Middlesex. George liked to brag about how tough he was. He relished the opportunity to do so at the expense of other inmates, including Adam. According to the autopsy report, Adam suffered 122 injuries, including 34 cuts and bruises on his head and face. One of his shoes was found in the garbage, saturated with blood, as a result of the beating. It's heartbreaking to think that Adam's last words were that of apology and remorse, which was the same with his killer. It's also heartbreaking to think that the officers on duty received no repercussions for not doing their due diligence. Anthony George was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder, with parole eligibility as soon as possible under the law. While the public obviously disapproved and were disgusted by George's actions, the same cannot be said in the interesting case of Stephen D. Sanderson, a criminal who was seen as a hero in some of the eyes of the public.
I feel bad for maybe the families, his family or something, but as far as remorse towards him, no.
This is Stephen D. Sanderson. Sanderson murdered his prison cellmate Theodore Dyer, who served a 25-year sentence for first-degree criminal sexual conduct against a child in October 2014. Sanderson, who was already serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the murder of his girlfriend in 1991, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in February 2015. During his sentencing, Sanderson clarified that he was not a hero. Some people praised his actions, but Sanderson stated that he did what he thought was best in the time he had.
People think I'm some kind of hero, well, I'm actually not.
He also admitted that he'd gotten emails criticizing him, saying it wasn't his place to judge anyone. Sanderson made it clear that he did not pass judgment on Dyer. He simply, quote, set up the appointment.
All happened. It's kind of been, people think I'm some kind of hero, well, I'm actually not. I just, did what I thought was best in the time that I was given. I don't know, I've been getting these emails saying that, it's not my position to judge anybody. And I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment.
Sanderson told police that he confronted Dyer about his conviction and began assaulting him after Dyer refused to stop denying or justifying his actions. Sanderson knocked Dyer out and strangled him with Dyer's shoelaces. Sanderson stated at his sentencing that he was not sorry for what he had done. He didn't feel sorry for himself, but he felt sorry for Dyer's family. Some of Dyer's family members were present, but refused to speak.
I feel bad for maybe the families, his family or something, but as far as remorse towards him, no.
Sanderson was sentenced to life in prison without any chance of parole. Sanderson's attorney, James Gust, pointed out that under Michigan law, Sanderson must serve his sentence for the Dyer murder concurrently with his current life sentence without the possibility of parole. Despite his crimes, Gust described Sanderson as a likable guy. He wondered if Sanderson's childhood would have been different if he had been born at a different time and to different people. After Dyer's death, Sanderson was transferred to a higher security level and is now incarcerated at the Ionia Correctional Facility. Sanderson had asked Gust a few months before his sentencing to inform Dyer's family that he had warned Michigan Department of Corrections personnel not to put him in a cell with a child molester because he would cut him down. Sanderson hoped that disclosing this information would allow the family to recoup some financial benefit. Child molesters always have a bad time in prison, which was made obvious by Julio Cesar Garza. This is Julio Cesar Garza, 31 years old. Garza was serving a 5-year to life sentence for aggravated robbery before he murdered his cellmate. He had a history of committing multiple crimes while incarcerated and had been given several chances to change his ways. Garza had mercilessly assaulted his cellmate, Carlos Adrian Javier Hernandez, for over 7 minutes. 14 years old, Hernandez was in prison for sexually assaulting and ending the life of a 15-year-old girl. He was serving a sentence of 15 years to life in prison when Garza decided that he had lived for too long. During the trial, Garza expressed regret for his actions, claiming that he did not intend to kill Hernandez. He admitted that he was responsible for his actions and regretted them daily. However, the judge determined that the nature of Garza's crime outweighed the circumstances that led to his crime. He was sentenced to life in prison without any chance of parole. Garza's defense attorney argued for a sentence of 25 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole. However, the judge pointed out that Garza had committed other violent crimes while in prison, and that his crime was particularly heinous and brutal. The judge also considered Garza's childhood experiences, but concluded that they did not justify or excuse his brutality. However, he expressed appreciation for his demeanor throughout the trial and sentencing. Garza's sister and his children's grandmother spoke on his behalf, saying he was a good father with a good heart. The judge stated that his responsibility to society and public safety outweighed Garza's personal circumstances. Not all prisoners are murdered because they were child molesters. Others had their life cut short because they got locked into a cell with the wrong guy at the wrong time, like in the case of Anthony Paradise. This is Anthony Paradise. The 44-year-old is serving time in prison for the 2017 robbery of Adirondack Trust Bank in Saratoga. But the 3-year sentence must not have been enough because he upgraded his sentence right there in prison. In October 2018, Paradise and Delmas Tanner were transferred from a Washington County facility to Greene Correctional Facility. Before the murder, Paradise was accused of attempting to strangle 2 other inmates on separate occasions. According to court documents, he attempted to choke and smother an inmate with his hands while incarcerated at the Saratoga County Jail in January 2018. Later that year, he allegedly wrapped a shoelace around the neck of another inmate at Washington Correctional Facility in an attempt to strangle them. The victim refused to cooperate, so the second incident was not prosecuted. However, Tanner wasn't that lucky. According to District Attorney Joe Stancione, Paradise strangled Delmas Tanner with a bedsheet in November 2018, while both men were in state prison. Sadly, Tanner died 4 days after the attack. Tanner was serving a 5-year sentence for attempted drug sales at the time of his death. 5 months later, a grand jury indicted Paradise, and he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in October 2022. Paradise was sentenced to 17 years to life in prison at Greene Correctional Facility for the murder of his cellmate. Even after the murder of his cellmate, Paradise's violent tendencies persisted. He allegedly punched and tackled fellow inmates to the floor in 2 subsequent incidents in January and July of 2022. He now faces a lengthy prison sentence, but if he behaves well behind bars, if he behaves really well and maintains good conduct, he could be released in 2040. While Delmas Tanner was not a child predator, it's obvious criminals who enter prison for crimes involving children do not have a glamorous stay, to say the least. Click here to find out why.